This guy gets isekai'd into his favorite evil strategy game and wakes up as the final boss of a creepy civilization. With his slime girl sidekick, he spreads doom, builds a monster nation, and somehow becomes the nicest evil overlord ever. Takuto is playing a game on his PC when he suddenly passes out and wakes up in a strange world. He is on a low-budget throne in a forest-like place. While enjoying the cool air, a cute lady approaches him and refers to him as King. Atu is a character Takuto loved the most in Eternal Nations, a strategy game set in a dark fantasy world he played while on his sickbed. He doesn't know what to do, as Atu referring to him as King means she sees him as the leader of Minagra. Atu informs him that he has achieved the feat of clearing nightmare difficulty while using the civilization said to be the most difficult to handle, the civilization of Ruin, Minagra. Takuto is a legendary player and ranks at the top. As Atu reminisces about how they conquered the world together many times, Takuto just stares at her like a dummy while she yaps away. He questions whether Atu summoned him to this world, but she was also isekai'd here. She explains that the world they are in is similar to Eternal Nations. Taking his hand, Atu tells him how happy she is to meet him in person and proposes that they build a kingdom just for the two of them, to which our pajamas-clad king agrees. Atu dramatically pledges her loyalty to him. They then decide to isolate themselves from other civilizations. Takuto produces a really ugly scout, which they make use of anyway. His emergency production calls for an emergency because what is that? It's like if a bug had a failed plastic surgery. Their plan is to gather information about other civilizations without being discovered by anyone. The long-legged bug, acting on Takuto's orders, runs off to check the area around them. Its voice makes cricket and mosquito noises sound like melody. Takuto can also share the long-legged bug's vision, just like in the game. He calculates the mana they have used and realizes that they don't have enough to create a warrior. Atu offers to fight instead, but Takuto knows that if they face a higher-ranking monster, she would be easily defeated, putting Minagra in a risky position. No need to worry that much, they could scare away even Godzilla with that weird scout bug they've got. So far, their flash, long-legged scout bug has not encountered any animals or monsters. Takuto passes this information to Atu, who then realizes how useless she is to them. Takuto comforts her, and she goes right back to her bubbly self. Eventually, the bug stumbles upon a community of dark elves, confirming that they're indeed in a fantasy world. Takuto knows that if there is another civilization nearby, it would be bad for them since he is trying to avoid war, which is the reason he wants them to stay hidden for now. According to Takuto, Minagra is a peace-loving civilization, so he suggests they just observe the elves while gathering more information on their surroundings. Atu applauds him, and they do a weird hee-hee-hoo chant. Just then, some dark elves enter their territory, and both parties are surprised to see one another. A little flashback: Jia, the head warrior of the dark elves, is leading his team to search for food for their dying population. One of his team members suggests leaving the forest, but they would have nowhere else to go. Elm is worried that, since they are in an accursed land, they might not find anything good, but Jia encourages them not to give up. They continue walking and soon encounter Takuto and Atu. To the dark elves, Takuto appears as a really dark being, literally. Jia is shaking in his boots or elf shoes. He knows that any action he takes could affect the fate of his entire tribe. He decides to bend the knee, and his followers follow suit. They really gave our boy the statue of God treatment from Solo Leveling. He introduces himself and his clan, the Mazaram clan, while being very careful with his words. When Atu asks him why he trespassed, he explains, still trembling, that his clan was persecuted and driven from their land. Jia adds that they ran out of food along the way and have been unable to find more. He recalls the sufferings they've endured and is terribly upset when, suddenly, an apple appears before him. Takuto produces more, but Jia is too scared to eat it. Not his people, though, who have already dug in. Getting unalived by starvation isn't an option. At this point, they get apples from Snow White's stepmother even. Seeing them enjoy the food, Takuto produces pears and enough provisions for their entire clan. Everyone is happy except for Atu. The dark elves depart with the food and return to their camp. Elves who are almost giving up can rejoice as Jia and the others bring back lots of food. Everyone eats to their satisfaction, and the camp becomes lively once again. When Jia is asked how he managed to get the food, he simply says he happened to find it. Later, Jia sits by the fire and is joined by Moltar, the leader of the dark elves. Moltar compliments Jia but senses that something is wrong. Jia tells him about his encounter in the forest and describes Takuto as a legendary being. Moltar assumes Jia has met the King of Ruin. He knows of a prophecy that speaks of the king who would bring ruin to all and force everything to start over from scratch. Jia admits that Takuto was beyond their understanding, but Atu had clarified his words to some extent. Moltar, however, is unsure if the being Jia encountered in the forest is truly the King of Ruin, but he knows it's not anything good. Now that he's full, he senses that the forest is abnormal. He questions whether Jia offered Takuto anything in return, as an evil being would not grant charity without expecting something in exchange. Moltar grows even more upset when Jia refers to Takuto as "Your Grace" and scolds him for it. Jia doesn't care. Takuto helped them, and it's only natural to show him respect. Bro really tasted the food and named the mysterious Dark Lord Your Grace. Moltar decides he will handle any further negotiations with Takuto as the leader of the elves. Meanwhile, Atu is talking Takuto's ears off about being so generous and wasting their scarce mana. Takuto apologizes, saying he'll do anything she asks. She feels he is doing too much, but her mood softens when he tells her he needs needs her. She apologizes for going off on him. Takuto seizes the opportunity to confess that he felt too awkward to say anything meaningful to the elves. Atu, however, thought he was simply playing the role of a lord who dislikes long-winded speeches. Their conversation continues with the bug observing quietly, looking like it annoyed the Hulk along the way and got its face rearranged in a serious beatdown. Molter and Gia plan to return to Takuto, eager to learn what he demands in return for his favor. They know that to survive, they need Takuto's powers, and if they leave the forest, they will struggle to find food again. So basically, they need Takuto because Bro can magically produce food. They set out. Meanwhile, Bug was watching them. Bug announces its presence with an ear-piercing sound. When Atu scolds Bug for interrupting her conversation with Takuto, he explains that he summoned it. Bug informs Takuto that the Dark Elves are on their way. Takuto still believes that having them nearby will cause problems. He wants to tell them to take the food and leave soon, but his communication skills suck, just like yours. Atu offers to be his spokesperson and pass on whatever information he wants to say, helping him increase his aura. They come to an agreement, and Atu is more than happy to help out. When Molter and Gia arrive, Molter introduces himself to Takuto. After Atu permits him to speak, Molter thanks Takuto for the food and asks for Takuto's name. Takuto nods to Atu to share, and she does, but stresses that they have to address both her and Takuto respectfully. Molter promises to engrave their esteemed names into the souls of his people. It's really not that deep, bro. Anyways, Takuto is pleased that everything is going well until Atu asks them to take the remaining food and leave. That's when Molter reveals the real reason for their visit. Molter asks how they can repay Takuto's kindness toward the elves, but Atu assures them that there are no strings attached. Even if there were, they wouldn't be able to satisfy Takuto because they are poor. When Molter hesitates to respond, Atu's expression darkens and she assumes they are plotting something. Now things are not really looking good. Takuto calls Atu aside and she immediately shifts to her bubbly self. He shares what he wants, but Atu is not having it. She feels that they should slay all the elves and put their heads on a pillar. It's giving evil queen energy, only that she's not a queen. Takuto reminds her that they want to build a good relationship with the elves, and her plan will not really get the job done. Atu reluctantly informs the elves that Takuto is willing to accept a price in return for his kindness. Molter thanks him for even considering it, and Takuto can sense that Molter is worried he might demand something evil. Atu then wonders what price they should ask for, and Takuto asks for information about the world beyond the forest. Molter eagerly agrees to share everything he has heard and witnessed. Atu tells them to leave the forest once they finish their discussion. Molter requests permission to stay with them in the forest, but Atu is quick to say no. Gia wants to insist, but Molter stops him and thanks Takuto for even listening. As they walk away, Takuto questions whether he made the right decision. He knows they have no chance of survival elsewhere. He calls them back and offers them the chance to become his citizens. They are all surprised, and Atu asks Takuto what he aims to achieve. He explains that he was considering using a refugee system. He knows dark elves are neither good nor bad, and that if they accept them as refugees into their civilization, they would become evil beings like them and would be able to coexist. Atu insists that dark elves are different from Minogra's main citizens, the homunculi, and that there is a risk of conflict. Takuto reminds her how disgustingly ugly the homunculi look and asks if she can bear a life with only them as citizens. Atu sees his point and agrees. She relays the information to the elves and also informs them that once they become citizens of Minogra, they will turn evil. As Takuto and Atu make their way through the forest to the elves' camp, Atu notes that it took quite a while for the elves to agree to become citizens, but Takuto understands how difficult it was for them to accept even after knowing they will become evil, even though it's their best option. Upon arriving at the camp, the elves bow in respect. Takuto's aura is so powerful that it causes one elf to pass out. The others avoid looking directly at him, fearing it would be disrespectful. Takuto takes his seat on the elven throne, and Atu announces that they are all accepted as citizens of Minogra. A system message appears notifying them of the agreement. Atu officially declares their citizenship status and promises them safety under Takuto's rule. Gio wonders why they haven't turned evil yet, and just then, he begins feeling a crazy rise of hatred deep within him. Hatred for those who oppress them. Every elf feels it too, followed by the joy of being cared for by Takuto, and they begin to cheer for him. Atu is satisfied with this. A few days after establishing the kingdom of Minogra, Takuto looks at the map of the continent that Molter gave him and realizes they're screwed. He throws a fit in frustration. There are two large nations on their continent. The first is the Holy Kingdom of Qualia, which worships the holy god Arlos and adheres to a strict good alignment. The second nation is an elven realm that worships nature and also aligns with good. Knowing that if the other nations discover their evil kingdom, they will be attacked, and since Minogra lacks military strength to defend itself, they're basically screwed. Realizing their situation, Atu joins Takuto on the ground. After some time of crashing out, Takuto decides to stay positive. Atu mentions that the Dark Elves are on their way to provide a report on the world beyond. This time, Molter and Gia come with Emla, whom they introduce to Takuto as an intelligent woman who knows much about legends and other nations. Atu informs them about the key positions they are to handle in the administration. Molter is assigned to manage state affairs, making use of his magic as well, while Gia will continue his role as head warrior and assist in the recruitment process. Both accept their roles, but Gia does too much as he promises to end their enemies in gruesome ways. Takuto tells him to calm down. Gia is shocked that an evil lord doesn't like violence and prefers peace. Atu tells them to get plenty of rest rest so they can start their work soon. Gia and Molter begin to argue about who is stronger and insist that they don't need rest. Emily, feeling left out, promises to do her best. Atu comments that the Dark Elves are workaholics. Takuto comes up with an idea to keep them busy and suggests improving the terrain. Atu explains to Molter what he needs to do, and he gives her his word that he will do his best. Gia is confused as to why the King of Ruins is not planning to destroy the forest. Takuto tells them to reforest too, but they have never heard of it. Atu takes the time to explain the concept to them. She discusses military magic and the 6 major elements, but Molter has only heard of 4. Molter is worried that Takuto is disappointed with their level of magical technology. However, Takuto believes they have a chance to get ahead of other nations once they advance it. Atu explains what reforestation is and says they'll use magic elements to speed up the tree growing process, which usually takes centuries to grow. She credits this knowledge to Takuto, which is not true, but the elves are impressed. Emily asks if Takuto also created the food they ate, and Atu agrees, adding that she loves grapes. Emily then mentions that she planted grape seeds and they are growing. Takuto and Atu are surprised, realizing they had overlooked the fact that they could use emergency production to create things that had never existed in the game. Takuto decides to test this ability by producing a coin. He quickly realizes the countless things he could create, despite it being mana-consuming. He bursts out laughing in realization, while Emily worries she may have done something wrong. Atu tells her that she did a great job.